Welcome to Rapid Fire Wednesdays Q&A for corporate immigration professionals. I'm Kimberley Robidoux, a partner in our San Diego office, and I'm joined today, as always, by Miki Matrician, co-managing partner of our Boston office. How are you doing today, Miki?
Doing well, Kim. How are you?
Good. So this week we are taking a deeper dive into the U.S. Department of Labor's Project Firewall. So this initiative was launched on September 19th, the same day as the H-1B presidential proclamation, and as such, it has gotten a lot less attention. So despite the lack of attention, it is really important for employers to prepare their compliance files. This is a landmark enforcement initiative aimed at protecting highly skilled American workers by ensuring that employers prioritize qualified U.S. applicants when hiring under the H-1B visa program. So, this initiative marks the first time that the Secretary of Labor will personally certify investigations into suspected employer noncompliance, signaling an unprecedented escalation in enforcement rigor. So, as we had previously mentioned, DOL's Office of Immigration Policy will lead Project Firewall in close coordination with federal partners, including the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. This interagency collaboration aims to root out discriminatory hiring practices and abuse of the H-1B program. So, Miki, what are the key enforcement focus areas under Project Firewall?
Yeah, the Project Firewall targets several critical compliance areas, including displacement of US workers by H-1B employees, misrepresentation or inaccuracies in labor condition applications, which are referred to as LCAs, failure to pay the required wages, including during periods of benching or downtime, and improper posting of LCA notices. Additional compliance risks also include the use of third party placement without proper documentation and discriminatory recruitment practices that disadvantage US workers. Employers that are found to be in violation may face severe penalties such as back wage payment, civil fines up to $35,000 per violation, and debarment from the H-1B program for 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, so what Project Firewall is emphasizing is strict adherence to laws that prohibit discrimination against US workers. And that includes laws such as the Immigration and Nationality Act and those provisions that prevent displacement of US workers. Also involved is the US Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, enforcement under the statute that addresses national origin discrimination, as well as EEOC's oversight of Title VII claims related to discriminatory hiring practices. So, with Project Firewall underway, employers really must ensure their recruitment and hiring processes do not exclude or disadvantage qualified American candidates. So, Mickey, given the focus of Project Firewall, what action items do you recommend for employers?
Yeah, the number one action for employers is to review their H-1B dependency. Under the statute and the Department of Labor's regulations, an employer is H-1B dependent if they employ 25 or fewer full-time equivalent employees, and at least 8 of those workers are H-1B employees. If a company employs 26 to 50 full time equivalent employees, and at least 13 of those employees are H-1B workers, the employer is H-1B dependent. And then finally, if the employer employs 51 or more full time equivalent employees and 15% or more of the workforce are H-1B workers, then the employer is H-1B dependent in that scenario. HR and global mobility professionals should work with counsel to document the number of H-1B workers versus the full-time equivalent employees. And it's important to note too that this includes aggregating part-time worker hours and equating them to full-time equivalents. And note too that this applies to companies treated as a single employer under the Internal Revenue Code. And then next, HR and global mobility professionals should review each H-1B worker to see if they're exempt. In order to be exempt, the H-1B worker must receive an annual wage of at least $60,000 or hold a master's degree or higher, or its equivalent, in a specialty related to the H-1B employment. And to prove a worker is exempt, the dependent employer must keep documentation in its public access file or internal records. For the 60,000 annual wage exemption, the record should include a copy of the LCA and evidence of the wage rate such as the offer letter, payroll records, and or the prevailing wage memo. And for the advanced degree exemption, the record should include a copy of the diploma, transcripts, or credential evaluation confirming a master's or higher in the relevant specialty field. These records will demonstrate compliance if audited by the Department of Labor. Kim, what if neither of those exemptions apply?
Well, if they do not apply, the dependent employer faces heightened scrutiny in their recruitment efforts. So, such dependent employers need to thoroughly document their recruitment efforts. And to do so, they must maintain detailed records of all job postings, outreach efforts, and applicant evaluations. They also need to make sure that the recruitment materials are open and accessible to U.S. workers and retain interview logs and objective justifications for hiring decisions demonstrating why U.S. applicants were not selected. And Miki, what do you recommend HR and global mobility professionals do at this time, given Project Firewall?
Yeah, I would say it's best that employers establish clear internal protocols for responding to Department of Labor inquiries. They also should designate a point of contact for communicating with the agency and then also consult legal counsel as soon as possible if there's any potential compliance issues. We'd also recommend conducting internal audits of public access files, including a review of all current and past public access files for completeness and accuracy. And public access files must include certified LCAs, wage rate documentation, actual wage memos, notices and postings, and benefit summaries. It's also important for HR and global mobility professionals to confirm that wage payments match those specified in the LCAs, including during any non productive periods. And then, of course, it's best not to keep files that are not required. So, employers should destroy any files that have exceeded the mandatory retention period in accordance with regulatory requirements to minimize risk exposure. And it's also important to ensure that the remaining files are securely stored, but also readily accessible for inspection. And HR and global mobility professionals should also have a process in place that requires foreign nationals with H-1B, H-1B1, and E3 status and their managers to notify HR and global mobility well in advance, at least 4 to 6 weeks, of any change in position or worksite location, even if that means a change in the foreign national employee's residence if they work from home at all.
Great advice, Mickey. And one last reminder and update today. So, we are heading into the travel season. And while this last update doesn't directly impact most foreign nationals in the United States, it shows that there are changes happening with respect to travel to the US every day. So, on October 23rd, the State Department updated the list of countries needing visa bonds. And that list now includes Mauritania, Sao Tome and Principe, Tanzania, the Gambia, Malawi, and Zambia. So individuals traveling on a passport from one of these countries that is eligible for a B1 or B2 visa must post a bond for $5,000, $10,000, or possibly even $15,000 and enter the US through a designated port of entry. So we are both traveling today, Mickey. I managed to make it home in time from an interview up in the Bay Area with one of my clients who was approved for citizenship today. And I know you were traveling as well. So where are you?
Yeah, so I just arrived in Salt Lake City for the WRC Global 25 conference. And on Wednesday, I'll be speaking on a panel on using benchmarking data to drive strategy decisions for immigration programs. And we have a great booth and great swag in the exhibit hall. So if anybody is around in Salt Lake City and coming to the Global 25 conference, I hope you come see us at booth 519.
Sounds amazing. And with that, I guess that wraps up this week's Rapid Fire Wednesday. We'll continue monitoring legislative, regulatory, and court developments, as well as agency guidance, and provide updates in future episodes as we hear of them. So, as always, for the latest updates to the immigration landscape, please follow WR Immigration on LinkedIn, as well as Mickey and my personal profiles for breaking updates and insights. And we also transcribe each and every Rapid Fire Wednesday episode and share it through our weekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to. The link to subscribe can be found in the video description. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Great seeing you, Miki, and have a wonderful time at WERC in Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Kim.